Sometimes we don't know that we are great leaders until the moment is thrust upon us. Today, I sit down with Kate Williams, the CEO of 1% for the Planet, where we talk about how she heard she was a great leader from somebody else putting trust in her to go save a group of people who was on a wilderness expedition. We'll learn about her journey in rescuing her team. We're going to talk about building for the future and overcoming some of the immediate challenges that come along with challenging our mindset and getting us to believe in who we can become one day. Today's episode is full of lots of golden nuggets, so let's tune in and listen to this amazing Hart Hustle story from Kate Williams.
What I've been working on is how to how to love the challenges and not feel like the point is just to get through them. Because whenever I get asked, what have been the biggest sort of transformation moments, when I look back, it's like, oh, well, it was that really challenging thing that felt yucky in the moment and where I doubted myself the most and where I really had to reflect and learn the most and all the hard things. But then, kind of getting through that and, the way forward is always through.
Kate Williams, the CEO of an amazing organization, 1% for the Planet. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here today. This is going to be fun.
Thank you. I'm excited as well.
So, Kate, I have to know, why did we dedicate so much of our time to doing such impactful work like this? With all the other avenues that we could have gone down in our career, how do we get to where we're at here today?
For me, it's about passion and meaning. And I think, maybe to a fault, I never saw that I could sort of create a path otherwise. So, I think from right after I graduated from high school, I really started sort of being oriented towards how can I build a career based on what I believe in.
And what were some of those early experiences that you kind of had on this journey that helped you not only realize that you were a leader, but you had a fundamental impact on the work that you were doing? Let's kind of talk about those early days.
Yeah, I had an aha moment, literally. And I'm grateful for that. And I realized that I was aware of it in the moment, which is a gift. So when I was 18, right after I graduated from high school, I had the, great opportunity to go on a extended backpacking trip in the mountains in Wyoming, the Wind River Range. And on that trip, we had all sorts of adversity, snow and missed rations of food and challenges like that. And then, and we soldiered through all of that. And then the kind of big challenge moment came when one of our instructors broke his leg. And in that moment, it really kind of crystallized a leadership opportunity for me, which I have been learning from ever since. So basically, in that moment, as an 18-year-old who had, thought of myself as having zero experience in this climate or this environment, I was tasked to lead a group because we had groups going in different directions to go out and get an evacuation underway, to carry the instructor to a pass. And I was tasked to lead the rest of the group. And in that moment, I didn't believe that I could do it, but I knew I had to kind of accept a leader I respected asking me to. And so it was this great opportunity to realize, all right, I get to tap into everyone around me and we get to do this thing. And we did. And we actually even had some fun. And when we got up there and got through everything and the instructor was being lifted off in a helicopter, so we had been successful, I had this amazing moment of being exhausted. My boots were wet, I was still hungry, all the things, but I felt elated and clear. And I said to myself, this is what I want to do with my life. And this was some combination of loving that big, wild place where I had gotten to really challenge myself and also really loving the additional challenge of figuring out how do you organize as a group to do this hard thing together. So that set me on my path.
It's amazing how we have those early experiences in life that show us almost a glimpse of our brilliance. You know what I mean? In moments where we're asked to either ring the bell or stand back, it's amazing to see how that internal motivation helps us step into a new version of ourselves that we didn't even know was possible.
That's such a great observation. And I realize my tendency is to be oh, no, it wasn't brilliance. But I think I appreciate you saying that because I do think having a leader, in this case, the leader of our overall expedition, point at me and say, Kate, he didn't use these words, but essentially what he was saying is, I believe that you can do this. I need for you to do this. do this. And so that enabled me to believe that I had it in me and that I could figure out how to do it. So I think you're right. It really is incredibly powerful.
And sometimes we have to be reminded of that brilliance as we go through kind of our professional career. So we're 18 years old, we're standing on the top of a mountain. Helivac just left, our boots are wet. What does the journey look like between there and here of being the CEO of 1% for the planet? What other kind of professional mountains did you have to climb during that, I would say, journey?
Many. And I would say I've had many other sort of figurative experiences of feeling like an 18-year-old who doesn't know exactly what to do. And I think that's been really important to realize that in a way that's the work and that's the opportunity, is to kind of keep facing the next challenge and seeing it for what it is. And so basically my path was one of figuring out what I meant when it was like, this is what I want to do. And if I divide my career into kind of chapters, the first chapter was saying I want to be an outdoor educator, because it was really powerful for me to have that experience, to learn and build relationships with other people and with wild places in such a meaningful way. So I was an outdoor educator for the first chunk of my career, taking students out and creating, hopefully, that experience for them. Fortunately, no more broken legs on the part of leaders, but like other, just real objective challenges that, are incredibly and deeply instructive, as well as, connective. So I had that chapter, and then, really decided I wanted to pivot into more of the focusing more on the leadership space, and also a little bit less in the field. As much as I loved that, it was time to kind of settle a little bit. So I went back to grad school and then shifted into working in the environmental space to still stay close to what I, really loved and what was meaningful to me, and to really start honing, which is now the lifelong process, what it means to lead people. And I say it's a lifelong process because I think with every passing year, I really learn that it is a new mountain every time, because you have different people, you have different challenges, the environment around you changes. So you definitely learn some things along the way, but you're always faced with a new context, a new way of seeing things.
That longer time horizon often scares a lot of people from leaning into that journey. One of the things that I think we've seen in the recent years is the landscape of life, the landscape of work, the landscape of how those two things come together has completely changed. And it doesn't seem like we have the benefit of sitting back on the laurels of leaders of the past in order to help us navigate these new turbulent times. Being a leader today is a skill set that continues to need to be refreshed. We have to be curious to think about how we're going to meet people where they are, but also inspire different generations to kind of follow along the mission and the journey that we've been laying out there. What do you think has been kind of your biggest lesson in leadership that you've been able to kind of hone in over the recent years?
I think the biggest thing for me is essentially a process of making what was kind of implicit. Like I sort of naturally showed up with some leadership qualities. So the reason my instructor in that 18-year-old moment pointed at me is in some way, without me being super conscious about it, I had demonstrated some of that. So my journey has been like kind of getting closer to what is it that is inherent, and then what do I need to learn and develop? Because I certainly have a lot of those things. So I think for me, that sort of long-term vision is essentially one of balancing both like some degree of confidence, but also a high degree of humility. Like the curiosity, I guess, is really what pulls me along, because I always feel like, oh, okay, I've learned that now, like, but wait, I don't know if I know how to do that. So I think it really is that implicit to explicit, with a lot of curiosity and increasingly awareness of like, oh, the point, there's no there. I'm never going to get to the point where I know it all. And I kind of highly doubt anyone who says that they do. But most importantly, in terms of me, the point is that it's a journey and I get to keep learning. And what I get to get better at is how I learn and how I show up in the learning process.
There's almost an undercurrent of gratitude that has to be balanced in this journey, right? Often when we get our goals right, they're in a finish line, a destination, an event, right? And it's like, hey, we made it. But when we get it wrong, it turns into a horizon. We take one step closer to our goal. It seems to move one step further away. How do you think you've been able to stay grounded in that sense of gratitude? Because becoming a leader, a great leader, is a challenge that a lot of people can't really quantify in their mind about how long this path really is to be able to accomplish the things that we say we want to.
I think for me, the couple of things. One is I am just curious. Like I do really like learning. In addition to kind of seeking meaning, I find that I'm most energized when I'm learning. So I fundamentally like the process of always realizing like, oh, okay, I've got that to learn. There's moments when it's discouraging, but like generally I like it. I think also I really, fundamentally like people. Like I'm interested in people. I'm curious about people. I like connecting to people and I learn a lot through that. And so that's a big part of leadership is relationship. And so I think I'm sort of pulled along by that because I think there's always relationship. And then one other concept that I didn't have early on, but I have kind of come to that has really helped frame how I approach it is this concept of an infinite game. So you use the kind of you like challenge, event, done, check. Seeing what we get to do as an infinite game totally changes everything. So we're still like in it and figuring out the rules and playing to win in the sense of to do our best. But the point isn't to end the game. The point is to continue the game and to say, how do we sort of keep going? And that concept, again, is one that I only came to in an explicit way a few years ago. But it really, for me, when I look back, I think that's a lot of how I've approached this and how I think about it and what keeps me going.
I've been playing around with the framework. Part of what I've been blessed to do is spend a lot of time with older leaders, people who are in their final stages, 80s and above, right? And, one of the things that I've heard a lot is the idea of regret. And a lot of these older leaders, and I ask them, what is the biggest thing you wish you would have done differently? And they say, not set higher goals for myself, not say, accomplish these things, but I wish I would have enjoyed the journey a little bit longer and a little bit more, because we are so, when you're a high achiever, often are focused on the next finish line, right? But when you're playing the infinite game, it creates a freedom, a feeling of enjoyment to be able to say, okay, if this is the entire process, I'm in the middle of it right now, how can I soak and get the most out of this process as I'm going through the next 10, 15 years, which is similar to that infinite game, but that scares a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess where I would land on that is, I'm not 80, so I feel like I'm kind of still in it. And so in a way, what I've been working on is how to kind of how to love the challenges and not feel like the point is just to get through them. Because whenever I get asked, like, what have been the biggest sort of transformation moments, when I look back, it's like, oh, well, it was that really challenging thing that felt yucky in the moment and where I doubted myself the most and where I really had to like reflect and learn the most and like all the hard things. But then, kind of getting through that and the way forward is always through. There's no workaround. And again, it does not feel good in the moment, but it is the opportunity. So I don't know if it's possible, but I do feel like the more I can have an awareness of how do I love the challenge and see the challenge as the opportunity without foregoing the like, you kind of got to feel the hard things to get the value from them.
And when it comes to such a big mission, right? Like the things we're trying to accomplish, specifically 1% for the planet, right? We're talking about a huge goal that we're trying to impact here. And when it comes to, the idea of, well, I hate having to restart. The simple answer is then stop quitting along the way and you wouldn't have to restart. There's been so many times, Kate, when I've come across these challenges and in the moment I'm like, this is not what I want to do. This is the worst thing possible. But on the other side of that hardship is where you actually get those secret lessons and those blessings that come out of those things. And unless you've been through it, it's very difficult to understand the compounding return of not giving up. But I feel like in society today, it's very easy for people to give up and say, hey, I'm going to go restart over here or go do something different. But we never end up building the momentum that we need to have a really big impact like we're shooting for.
That's another great point. And I guess when I think about that, one of the kind of challenge opportunities of my own kind of way I approach things is that I feel a great deal of responsibility and sometimes loyalty to the people and concepts I've made a commitment to and organizations that I've made a commitment to. So for me, part of my integrity is doing what I said I'm going to do and sticking with it. And, I think that's been helpful for me, even if sometimes, I've had to learn like, sometimes you need to step away in order to get through. And, that's been a learning for me. But I do think you're right that it can be very attractive to see that other shiny thing over there, which would obviously be so much easier. But I think, I've had enough experiences now, and I think this is the gift of having led for a while, is I've had enough experiences of going through the hard stuff and seeing the sort of deep rewards, which are not necessarily shiny, but they're these like the sort of deep fulfillment of seeing something through and doing so in relationship to what you care about. So
If you could go back to, let's say, that 20-year-old version of Kate, right, who's still riding the high of that amazing experience she had on that mountaintop, what would a piece of advice be that you gave to her, how she was going to navigate the next couple years of her career? Anything that you think that would really help her or just refortify her on this journey?
I would say two things probably. One, no fear, in the sense of, truly be courageous, which in my mind means like feeling the fear, but then like discerning when you need to say, but I'm still gonna step over the edge here. And I feel like I've generally, taken some risks, but I also know there are places where I may have like not sort of asked those hard questions around like, what is this fear telling me or not telling me? So that would be one thing I would say. And the other is, try and like banish should from your vocabulary, both in terms of the voices inside your head that might have shoulds, but also in terms of like talking to other people, just because I think it's like a way of judging ourselves and a way of judging others. And I just feel like eliminating should is a good thing. And I don't look back with regret on either of those fronts, but I do look back with like learning.
Let's double click on the should a little bit. Why did we say that out of all the pieces of advice that you could have given to Kate? What does that mean?
I think I was and have been, somewhat based on my family circumstances, like I'll do the right thing. Um, and I have two older brothers who were, kind of lived large during high school, which created some stress in our family. And lived large is a nice way of saying like they, definitely rebelled against the norms. And fortunately, they're fine, and I love them. But that was, that I think I was probably wired for this a little bit, but then I really stepped into like, I'll do the right thing. I'll get good grades. I'll do this. And, there was some should in that. And I think seeing now that there's no one way to do the right thing. There's no one way to be a good human. And I think creating a little more space, if you take should out, you have a little more space to, put some different verbs in place. Like, what could I do? What might I do? What do I really want to do? For me, those have been really opportunities to live into as I've gotten older and been able to kind of separate from the should.
We live in such a predominantly should culture. You know what I mean? If you think about even what it means to be a nonprofit CEO, people say you should be doing this, you should be doing that. What it means to be a leader, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. What it means to be, in business, you should be. And I feel like often we don't ever really recognize how powerful it is to go against the should until somebody has the bravery to do it, and they become that new cornerstone of, oh, there's a different way of doing this. Do you know what I mean? There's always that prolific leader who goes against the grain when everybody else is becoming a copy and paste version of everybody else, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's also like there's so many subtle opportunities for us each every day to kind of think about that. Because for me, I know like the should does come like roaring back in when I'm stressed or something like that. Because it's like, that's my default. If I do that, that's kind of the right path. And it's like, no, actually, like stop, listen, learn, be courageous. And that's where the sort of should and fear, courage, like that's all part of the same kind of thread. But I do think you're absolutely right. Like having that ability to not be limited by the shoulds, because effectively it's a limiting framework. If you get that out of the way, so many things are possible that are not possible when you have should as your ceiling.
There's a really good book. It's called The Untethered Soul. I don't have the author in front of me, but I read this book back in like 2020, 2021. He talks about the analogy of that voice inside your head. He talks about it as a roommate. He said, often, we live our lives directed by this narrative or this voice in our head that tells us what we should be doing. But one thing you need to recognize, if you can hear that voice, that means that you are an observer of that voice, meaning that that is someone else's voice that you spent so much time with that you confuse it as being your own. How do you think about your relationship with that inner roommate and how it's dictated kind of your career and the things that you do as a CEO as well?
That's a really great way of putting it. I'll have to get my hands on that book. I think, having children for me has been an opportunity to kind of clarify a relationship to that, in that when my kids kind of launched, which they have now launched, it was a little heartbreaking. I mean, love them so much. And, having that chapter of kids at home end and moving into a chapter of like that, a new chapter. For whatever reason, I think partly just given what I was describing in terms of sort of my own experience growing up with some shoulds in place, imposed mainly by me, I think that gave me a chance to be like, well, wait a second. Like, there's no should script that I'm even aware of for this chapter in my life. So it really did help me in a new way to kind of be able to talk back to that roommate, to use your
Mm-hmm.
language. So for me, in a way, I don't totally know why that was the moment, but other kind of challenging moments that have like cracked open the kind of path. Another time was when I got laid off from a job. It's like, wait, this wasn't the narrative that I expected. I don't know how to do this narrative. It really did give me a chance to have to tell that roommate, like, I'm not sure that you know the script any more than I do. So, like, wait a second. So, when I got laid off, one of the greatest takeaways from that, again, like challenge being opportunity, is for whatever reason, that experience gave me a really clear, and it's stuck, like, ask for what you want. I realized I could do that, which for probably for some people listening are like, yeah, of course, that, you can always do that. For me, that was pretty new to just be able to say, well, what do I want? And ask for it. And it's been a really like powerful learning for me.
When it comes to what you want and how you ask for it, how are you taking those lessons and implementing those as the CEO of this amazing organization? What are some of the things that you're focusing on, and what are you really asking for?
As CEO, one of the things I think about a lot is, how do I lead in such a way that I create the conditions for everyone in the organization to be wildly successful? I definitely do not get that right all the time. So, for any of my staff who are listening, just like full ownership that I know that I say that. And I know you also know that I don't always get it right. But for me, being clear and putting words to my best hope for how I can be my best leader, that's what I want. And then that gives me a way to, and it's, there's probably rarely going to be one day where I 100% get it right with every single person in the organization. So it's like an aspirational goal. And that to me is important, because then that always is going to pull me through to be better. And on my good days, I'm staying really attuned to, how do I know if I'm creating those conditions? What are questions I need to ask better? On my less good days, maybe when I'm feeling like the shoulds crowding in, or my roommate, like, kind of winning the argument, I think I can get a little like more like less curious and less able to sort of see those ways. And so that's clearly like the learning journey continues.
When it comes to the work that you guys do at the organization, why is this so important for you?
I really love that question, because I do think for a impact focused, mission led organization, it feels extremely important to me that our team and how we are doing our work together, is effectively kind of consistent with that. So if we're about our why, the why of 1% for the planet, our purpose is to inspire action and commitment so that our planet and future generations thrive. So that's what we exist to do. it's really important to me that there's coherence and sort of integration with how our staff experience doing the work, how our members and all of our stakeholders experience being in relationship with us. And again, don't always get that right, but I do think to not even strive for that sort of integration across what you're striving to do and how you do it, then you're always going to be sort of dragging down the mission, because to not be creating the ability for staff or for the larger community that you're involved in to be an example of what that mission and why are, that feels like then you're kind of always going to be a little bit, you're lesser than what you could be.
Why is this work so important for the future generations to understand the connection between us in this, I would say, digital cocoon that we seem to live in, and the connection to nature that is so not common to so many people here today? Why is the work that you guys do so important to kind of bridge that gap?
I think it's really important because fundamentally there's not a gap. We experience it as a gap, but as human systems and human communities, we actually are part of nature. We have done our darndest to create lots of ways that we don't experience ourselves as part of nature, but we are. And so I think doing the work to reconnect and to create communities of experience where people are able to see and feel and be healthier as a result of kind of tapping into that connection, whether it's cleaning up pollution or giving kids access to outdoor experiences or all of the things that we do through our impact areas. Fundamentally, when we sort of reestablish a healthy connection in which we are part of contributing to and part of a healthy ecosystem, there's so much gain for everyone in that ecosystem: human, plant, animal, and everything in between.
It seems like a lot of the prevalence of the mental health challenges and all of the feelings of isolation and loneliness and everything else that's going rampant through our society today seems like there's a really obvious antidote that's sitting on the table in front of us, but nobody really wants to grab it. It's like, hey, go outside, let's get grounded, experience what it means to be connected to this entire being of Earth that you're a part of every single day, whether you like it or not. And let's get off of these devices. Doesn't it seem pretty obvious that, at least through your life experiences and that aha moment at the age of 18 showed you that your connection to this bigger being of Earth was something that a lot more people need, but it seems like it's such a challenge for us to be able to tap into today. I don't know why.
It's a really good question. And there's all sorts of good evidence about, people in hospitals heal faster, even when they have a tree outside their hospital window. It's super simple. So it doesn't need to be big mountains in Wyoming. It can be, a tree growing out of a cracked sidewalk and just being able to, lay hands on it. But I think you're absolutely right. I know for me, that's hugely important. And I guess it seems like balancing what we gain. You and I are having this great conversation. I'm able to, from a dead end of a dirt road in Vermont, where I happen to live, play a role leading a global community. And I value that. And so I'm aware of the, what we have gained by some of these connections, but I am, to your point, very aware of what we've lost as well. So, I do think one of some of the meaning in my work is, and really where my whole career started, is fundamentally it's about relationship. And I do believe that our relationships with each other, and when we can make those happen in person and, be sort of breathing the same air in in ways that enable us to be sort of connecting in a particular place at a particular time, are an experience of nature. And then, if we can do that with our feet on soil in the presence of trees, that's great. And again, it doesn't have to be big, wild places, a community garden, but I think it's really, really important.
I had a guest on the podcast last week. His name was Chris Nelson. He's a CEO for Freedom Service Dogs. We were having an amazing conversation about community and connection. And he said, Keenan, although we have all of these opportunities to connect with one another over virtual connectivity like Zoom and everything else that we use, you still have to remember that you're sitting in your office right now with headphones in, sitting in a quiet room by yourself in front of a television screen. And I had to pause and look around and say, Chris, you're right. You know what I mean? Like, I do this virtual connectivity all day, but I'm still missing the human element. And you cannot ignore the intuition of your brain telling you that this is not what I'm looking for, but it's a substitute that we created, which is an opportunity for us to connect and have these conversations, which is great, but it still can never live up to that human experience of spending time and feeling the energy of somebody else, which is so unique.
Absolutely. And I really do believe in that sort of energetic connection. And if that sounds woo woo for some people,
Woo
like,
woo all day.
I apologize, but I do think it's really important to just name it, because I'm glad we can have this conversation and to acknowledge that we're exchanging words, some hand gestures, but we're not like in the same sort of physical space, which means that there are sort of senses and exchanges of information that we're not doing. And it, just acknowledging that, like, we can value this for what it is, but then also recognize that, being together in the same place has that ability to kind of give us a next level connection. So look forward to meeting you at some point.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to make that happen. So my question for you is, I was having a conversation a little earlier today with a digital transformation consultant. And she was talking about how every business leader today continues to think about things like artificial intelligence for them to be able to, I would say, execute on their business mission and vision. How are you thinking about technology being the supercharger, the additive, whatever we want to call it, to help you guys execute on your guys' vision for the connection with nature and environmental conservation, everything else like that?
Yeah, at the simplest level, I would say the way we're thinking about it is, how can we leverage technology from, like, more sort of basic digital tools to machine learning to AI to, automate or expedite those things that are better done, faster done, like more sort of done in a better service orientation through those modalities, such that our limited staff can, maximize the ways that they're having phone calls, traveling to events to be together, doing the things that are not better done by a digital modality, but are better done by saying, hey, I heard your feedback and I'd love to learn more from you. Like, could we get on a call, or whatever the case may be? So, that's our sort of high level sort of framework, which we've implemented in some successful ways. And we have, like, learning and opportunities for growth for sure.
What are some of those ways in which you guys have implemented that stuff? Just so everybody can understand, 1% is an amazing organization that's doing so much for the environment, conservation, and it doesn't seem like you guys would be using so much technology to put the human in the human seat, which is really interesting.
Yeah, so a couple of things we're doing. We have a network of more than 5,000 members and more than 7,000 nonprofits, and we have a staff of, at this point, fewer than just under 50. And all of those relationships at different times, we're in direct relationship with all of those, more than 10,000 stakeholders, and then more. And so for those, we're using some tools that enable us to kind of automate some sequences of responses when that's helpful, when it's a sort of repeatable process that, someone is seeking information about. So super simple, nothing fancy, but we use that. We have some tools that enable us to facilitate kind of first response communications when someone emails in, just, again, super simple, but it enables us to have a smaller group of people managing a larger network at a high level of service. So those are just some of the basic things. And those are all awesome ideas from staff members who sort of saw the bottlenecks, named them, found solutions, and made it happen, which is the way it should be.
Absolutely. So this didn't come from Kate's brain. She's using the team to be able to think about how we're going to use all these technologies in so many different applicable ways. Let's talk a little bit about the future. So the vision that we're casting for the 1% team, how are we getting people excited about where we're going, and how are we using that vision to attract the next great generation of, 18-year-old Kate standing on a mountaintop who realize this is the work that they want to do?
We have a big vision that has two parts. And just to back up a quick step, the way our model works is that we have business members who give 1% of their revenues every year. So we certify that and we call that our certified impact. And so our sort of key metric of success is the total tally over our lifetime of that certified impact. So our big goal, looking ahead at the future, that also has a secondary goal. Our big goal is to get to 1 billion US dollars in lifetime giving in the next 2 to 3 years. So we're on track for that. We're at about 670 million US dollars now. So that's the sort of big impact goal. And the sort of supporting goal is to build the organization that can get to the next billion and the next billion faster. And, so that we can kind of keep scaling from there. Because to our infinite game conversation earlier, that's not a finish line. That's a we've learned how to do this. We've built a community that can do this. Now we need to engage this community in all that we've learned to sort of keep going and keep accelerating.
What an amazing mission to be a part of. I'm so glad that we were able to touch on the infinite game here today, because at the end of the day, if we put a finish line in front of ourselves, I think we are often cheating ourselves at the full potential of what we truly could accomplish with the experiences and the people and the relationships that we come across in the future. Kate, as we kind of land the plane here today, one of the questions that we do at the end of our podcast came from our previous guest. Now, this is an amazing individual, CEO of an organization that's helping advocate for the next generation of great thinkers in education. He wants to know, what is the worst piece of advice that you've ever gotten?
Ooh, that is an interesting one. I think that the worst piece of advice that I have ever gotten is this is going to sound small, but I'll go for it. You should stop setting it as a goal to get back to running because you have you're older and you have a knee injury. You should just kind of back off. And that was given to me by a PT after knee surgery. And I know it's not a CEO example, but I do for me, it was I can pull it in metaphorically to the rest of my life because I'm always using kind of sports metaphors for how I think about stuff. And, and the reason I hesitated and it was hard to think of is because it actually came out to be good advice because my there is a stubborn person in here. I was well, wait a second. I completely reject that. So how can I go find what I need to find to be able to get stronger? And I did, and, feel like I'm actually stronger than I was before the knee surgery, but no thanks to that particular advice, or maybe thanks entirely to that piece of advice, which kind of lit the fire. And I think that's important to me as just a CEO and a human, because it reminds me, and as an example of kind of our should conversation, and don't be afraid or don't limit yourself. Of course, there are going to be limitations. I know that when I'm 90, I might not be running as fast or whatever, but hopefully I'll be strong in the way that I can be strong in that phase, in the same way that leading new challenges that I can't even anticipate right now, which is basically the work of being a CEO. I want to keep saying, oh, okay, wait, that mentality won't work. I got to try to find a new one.
Okay, that's an amazing way for us to put a perfect bow on today's episode. I want to say, for all the amazing work that you're doing, the team that you're inspiring, the personal journey and those aha moments that you shared here today, it's been amazing getting to know you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation.
And there we go, guys.